And we're back. Welcome everyone to another Reedsy Live, Reedsy's ongoing series of webinars where we bring on professionals from the world of publishing to show you how to write and publish better books. For those of you who have tuned into our last few, we've been focusing on a bunch of craft topics and some traditional publishing bits, but as you know, if you're here already today, we're going to be looking at picture books with Jennifer Rees, one of the most prolific editors here on Reedsy. She's fantastic. She's worked with so many people. I've seen from the comments that a bunch of the people who have worked with Jennifer already are here joining us today, so that's amazing. Anyway, she's going to be leading you through some of the big mistakes that people make when they first write picture books, and she's going to offer you... I sold it as the one golden secret, but hopefully she's figured out what that golden secret is since I sold it. But thank you, everyone. While we wait for Jennifer to join us, why don't you tell us where you are today? And I'll see if I can read a few of you out. We got Tim from Texas, Throne from London, Linda from Orlando, Florida. Okay, so we got the East Coast and this side of the pond. Oh, by the way, hello, I'm Martin. I'm from the Reedsy team. I'm based here in London. Reedsy, of course, is a company where our team is sort of dotted all around the world, as companies are these days. But myself, I'm holding down the fort here in jolly old London. We've got James from Wine Country and San Francisco Bay Area. Fantastic. Margaret from Wilmington, North Carolina. Margaret, I think I've seen you before. Jenai, I think from Connecticut. We have Helen from Derbyshire, England. April from Michigan. B. Benson asks, are you guys still in lockdown? If you're talking to me, yes, kind of. Nothing is open. But there are some people who are behaving as though lockdown is still not a thing, but... I'm still hunkered down anyway. Jim from North Carolina, hello, thanks for joining us. Astronometer from Garland, Texas. Okay, we're seeing a lot of East Coast. Washington, oh, that's West Coast there. Romeo, Debbie from Romeo, Michigan. Oh, fantastic. Aha. And Marvin from India. Thanks for joining us. I know it's quite a late one. It's 12:30 over there right now, so I appreciate you joining us, but... hopefully we're going to be learning a lot about picture books from Jennifer. She's fantastic. She comes to us from the world of traditional publishing. She's going to tell us a bit more about that. And I need to ask her exactly what her experience on the Hunger Games was, because I read that, but I haven't dug further into that. But the Hunger Games is a book that we always use as an example whenever we're talking about writing topics over at Reedsy. It's one of those books that is popular enough and the film adaptation is close enough that everyone sort of understands the story. And so when you're talking about story structure, it tends to be a good example to throw out. If you look on the Reedsy blog, you'll see the things that always pop up as examples are Pride and Prejudice, The Great Gatsby, and maybe Harry Potter. Those are our sorts of go-to books where we go, I think most people have maybe read this or understand it enough for this to be a touch point. Anyway, I see it is 7 o'clock over here in London, which means it's 3 p.m. Over in the East Coast of the United States. So, why not, without further ado, let's bring on Jennifer. Jennifer, how you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Tell me, where are you coming to? Where are you coming from today?
I am from, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that's where I'm coming from. I spent many years in publishing in New York City, and I have 3 boys. And when they were starting to get older and we were starting to get cramped out of our little teeny tiny house, my husband and I started thinking about like, where else could we go? So we have a little bit of breathing room and it's not so expensive. And now that I freelance, I can do it anywhere. And I love being back home in Pittsburgh.
That's fantastic. You know, they used to say you can never go home, but I think if the last few years has taught us anything, is that, yeah, you definitely can.
You can.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, we're just going to give a few minutes for a few more people to roll in before we start talking about your background and let you get on with the presentation.
Sure.
For a bit of housekeeping, everyone at home, Jennifer's going to give a talk where she's going to reveal her big mistakes and her golden secret. Have you prepared the golden secret?
I have.
Fantastic. And then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So you can ask questions in the comments box here on YouTube throughout. If it's super, super relevant, I'm going to maybe bring it up and ask it, but we'll probably keep all the questions till the end. So if you have any good questions, make sure you save them. We'll have a decent Q&A where we'll go through as many of them as we can. In the next couple of days, I'll get a transcript of Jennifer's presentation done, so don't worry about taking notes. If you signed up on Eventbrite, you're going to get a follow-up email with a link to the transcript, of course, and then you'll be able to sort of see all the points. And yeah, so don't worry, relax, enjoy this one. And then, of course, one more thing. Jennifer is, of course, an editor here on Reedsy. So if you like what you see, just head down to the description in this YouTube video and click to see her portfolio and profile, and then you can send her a request and work with her on your next book. Okay, I should probably stop talking so quickly, but let's see. You know what? We might as well start. People can catch up if they need to. I'll be behind the scenes if you need anything, Jennifer. Otherwise, I'll see you for the Q&A.
Okay, great. So I am just going to begin. So again, my name is Jennifer Rees, and I'm a children's book editor here at Reedsy, which I really, really love. I'll just give you a very brief introduction to me. You can read more about me on my Reedsy page. But I actually got my start in children's books. I was a bookseller for 2 years at Joseph Beth Books in Cincinnati. And they needed somebody in their children's section. And I had just gotten my master's, and I was like, are you kidding me? But I always was a reader as a child. And when I got into the children's book world, I loved it. I read everything. I read picture books, I read middle grade novels, I read teen fiction, and I did this for 2 years. And so when I was sort of like figuring out what I wanted to do, I moved to New York without a job, and I interviewed, and I got a lot of offers. And I thought it was from my fancy education, and everybody told me, we really would love to have you because you know children's books, you know them inside and out, you know the publishers, you know the authors, you know what's new, you know what customers come in and ask for, you know what gets returned, you know what doesn't sell. And so I got a job offer at Scholastic, and I built my entire career there. I loved it. I worked in the hardcover division. Scholastic is huge. Most people have heard of Scholastic. It's huge. So I worked at Scholastic Press, which is a small imprint of Scholastic, and we do all hardcover. So you're really talking about, premier, amazing big books and very commercial. And so that's my background. I decided to leave Scholastic, and the only reason I decided to leave is because I have 3 children. And when number 3 came up, I just felt pulled in a lot of different directions. And I was getting pulled more into the sales side of, the managerial side of Scholastic, and not so much the editing side. And I really missed that. And so freelancing has been truly terrific for me. I love what I do here at Reedsy. I work with amazing people. I get to really help them from the ground up make and create beautiful, beautiful books. And I work at Reedsy on picture books, middle grade novels, and young adults. So I really like to have the range, but there's a special place in my heart for picture books. I still read them to my boys, who are now 17 and my youngest is 9. So that's a brief recap. That's a cap of me. And again, you can find out more about what I've worked on if you go to my Reedsy page. So just what to expect. So I'm gonna go over 8 points pretty briefly, but hopefully you'll get a lot of information in each one of those 8 points. Basically, common pitfalls, things that I see all the time in manuscripts, and things that I tell writers again and again and again that I just see keep cropping up. So they're all like common mistakes. They're things that, just aren't always apparent right away when you're just sitting down at your desk writing a picture book. And so I want you to be able to see them in your own work and address them in your own work. And at the end, of course, is the golden secret, which I hope doesn't disappoint. But what I've also included at the end, so I hope you'll stay tuned, I also included some of my favorite resources that I recommend to writers all the time. And I also have included what publishers, agents, and editors are looking for. And that's definitely worth sticking around for. So basically where I'm coming from is I am going to be talking about manuscripts for people who are hoping to get published traditionally by a publishing house. However, I know a lot of people, a lot of my clients self-publish. A lot of people are on the fence, and that's fine. You don't have to know, because even people who think that they're going to self-publish, I think you'll find value here, because really, in the end, what we're talking about is just a great, satisfying story. And no matter which direction you decide to go, you need to have a super satisfying story. And so that's really where I'm coming from in this presentation. And of course, if you have questions later on about publishing versus self-publishing, you can ask those later. So here I'm really talking about the end goal, which is to be able to submit your work to an agent, a literary agent. And just really quickly, a literary agent is someone who signs you up with them, and then they go and they shop your work to publishers. And also to, like I was an editor at Scholastic, I would get a ton of submissions. So that is also, people submit simultaneously to agents and also to editors, and that's fine. But you want to have something you're very, very proud of and something you feel strongly about. So that's what we'll be talking about. I want to bring up, so the standard picture book age category, which a lot of people don't realize, is ages 4 to 8. And I say that because I get manuscripts all the time, and people say, this manuscript is for like ages 2 to 14. There's no such category. That category does not exist. Erase it from your mind. If ages 4 to 8 is something that booksellers use, Amazon uses as a way to categorize your book so that a consumer can go to their website or walk into Barnes & Noble and find your picture book. So that doesn't mean that a 2-year-old can't enjoy your story or that a 10-year-old can't either. But what I'm really talking about is that solid category. It's huge. If you go to Amazon, it's one of the categories. And that's where most of your picture books are going to fall. So I'm not really talking about concept books, books for babies. Though if you are that writer, I think you'll still find value here in commercially what I'm talking about with books. And it also, I'm not really going to be talking about picture books for older kids. A nonfiction, complex topics sort of fall into this category. Although, again, I think you'll still find value in what I'm talking about today. And don't think of the age category as limiting your book. Again, it's just really a marketing tool. Okay, so 8 mistakes. Let's just dive right in. Your first is your format. I get all kinds of funky formats. This is what you need to realize, is that if you're submitting your book to an agent or an editor, they have less than that much time to read your manuscript. So if your manuscript isn't clean, isn't easily readable, they're just not even going to bother. They're very, very busy, as I'm sure you realize. So you want everything to just look nice, neat, and clean. And this isn't going to look great, but I'm going to try my best here. So again, simplicity. This is what a manuscript should look like when it comes to me. So if I can get it on here. So you want to have your contact information here in your left-hand corner. In your right-hand corner, you want to have your word count. And I will talk about this later. It's very important. Then you come down a little bit and you have your title. You like my title there. And your name. I like to put it in caps. I just think it looks very nice. And then you come down a little bit more and you just start your format. You want a really clean, readable font. I like Times New Roman. You want it to be 12 point, and you want to double space your manuscript. And you don't, and again, you just go straight down. You don't try to emulate picture book page turns. Sometimes I get like a 50-page document. I'm like, what is happening? Because somebody's taken one line and put it on one page, and then on the next page is another line. And what ends up happening is that your editor or your agent's not going to read that because it's too long. They're just going to say what's happening. So you just want a nice, clean, simple format. The other thing that I see a lot is people try to paginate their books. Picture books are very specifically paginated. they don't start on page 1. So a lot of times I'll see page 1, page 2, page 3. It's not the way that they're paginated at all, because you have front matter. You have, I'm just going to hold up. This is one of my favorite books. You have, a title page. You have end papers. You have, that's a half title page. You have a copyright page. So you do not need to number your manuscript. You don't need to number your pages at all. An editor just wants to read your story. And so what will happen is that if you try to number your pages and figure it out, it's just going to look really amateur. And that person's going to say like, oh, this person doesn't really know what they're doing. When your manuscript hopefully gets sold or bought by a publisher, you have a whole team of people dedicated to figuring out your page turns for you. You have a design team, you have your editor, you have your illustrator. And so that should just be a nice load off your mind. You don't need to worry about it. All we want to do is read your story. By the way, just so that you know, most picture books fall into the 32 pages category. And I mention that because I do get a lot of manuscripts from people who say like, my picture book is 72 pages, and that's much, much, much too long. And I'm going to talk about word count in a little bit. The next thing, this is huge. The next mistake I see people make is that they hire me and they say, oh, this is great. I'm not an illustrator, but my friend illustrated this book for me and it's ready to go, or I hired somebody and I have illustrations. If you are somebody who only writes, there's another offshoot, which I'll talk about later, but if you're someone who only writes manuscripts, please do not get your picture book illustrated. You're going to waste money. Most people, I'm sorry, I'm sure you all have great design sense, but I've seen some really terrible outcomes. And so what happens is that you send this picture book off to an agent or an editor, and they see the muddy illustrations, or they see, it's just not very satisfying, and they're just going to pass on it because they're just going to think this is just awful. So that's the truth. So that is also another load off your mind. You really, if you're not an illustrator, don't find them. Don't try to do it yourself. Just work on your story, work on your craft. Your publishers prefer to have their own illustrators. They prefer to find somebody who's exactly perfect for that story. And again, they have a whole entire design team dedicated to doing this. Now, if you are an author illustrator, yes, you and that's your goal, is to illustrate your own work. And I'm talking not somebody who just doodles, but somebody who actually can illustrate, that you know what you're doing, not somebody who's like drawing in crayon. You would also want to submit your manuscript and also some art samples. And if you have any questions about that, you can ask me about that. Another thing which kind of falls under illustrations is everybody thinks they have to have illustration notes the entire way through their story. So I get a lot of questions about that. Keep in mind, again, we're going back to the editor or the agent who doesn't have a lot of time. They don't want to read your illustration notes unless it is absolutely crucial to the understanding of your story. So, you don't need to say the grass was green and the leaves were blowing and the house was red. I mean, you have to understand you're going to have illustrations in your story. So you don't need to say those things. You really just want to say, I always use this example. If you have a character who's kind of going along about her day and she drops her keys unbeknownst to her, and the story kind of hinges on her losing her keys, then you would want to add a little illustration note that says, Violet dropped her keys. And I don't know if you can see this. I'm sorry, everybody. But do you see that illustration note, how I have that there in brackets? That's how you do an illustration note. It's short and sweet, very simple. Try not to use them. Is really what I recommend. Okay, so number 3, the biggest mistake I see Your word count. So picture books of yesteryear were nice and long, and they went on for days and days. They went on forever. Um, Nowadays, nobody has patience anymore. I am certain it's due to our technology. Nobody wants a long picture book. Parents are exhausted. Kids are exhausted. Parents don't want long picture books. I'm a parent of 3 boys. I have to say that sometimes I agree with that. So your word count, if I get a manuscript that's 1,500 words, all that says to me is that you do not know your market. You cannot send a 1,500 word picture book to an agent or an editor. They won't even consider it. They will just pass on it because you clearly have no idea what's selling right now. Shorter the better. So I would give you a range of about 500 to 800 words. 800 words really being the top. You'll hear different things. I hear some people that say under 1,000 is fine. I work for a lot of literary agents. I do a lot of reading and editing for them. And if it's over 600, they're like, no. So, because they hear it from publishers over and over again that they don't want long picture books. So, of course, there are some exceptions, which would be if you're doing something nonfiction or something for older children. And of course, some more complex content that puts you in a different category, and you really don't need to worry so much about your word count. But even with word count, I would tell you that it really doesn't matter so much how long your work is. If it's reading long, it's too long. That's always the goal, is for your work not to be reading long, not to be feeling slow at any point, not to be saying in too many words what could be said with less. So yes, is the new dawn of the picture book is for them to be really short and to depend a lot on illustrations, which is why illustrations are so important and why you shouldn't do them yourself. Okay, so this is number 4. This is kind of a fun one that I love to think about, and I think people don't consider it, is that I see a lot of books that have absolutely zero, and I mean zero, hook. And when I say hook, what I mean is that this is the thing that gets readers interested in reading your story. That's what gets the agent to want to check out your book. Your story must have a hook. This, you can think of it as a 2-sentence description of your book. If you cannot do this with your story, it means you don't have a hook. And I'm going to go through some examples so you can understand what I mean. Some people call it an elevator pitch. Like, you need to describe your book to somebody in 2 sentences. How would you do it? Does it sound exciting? Is it something that kind of makes somebody perk up? So I'm going to do some examples here with some show and tell. So somebody says to you, I have this great book. It's a story about a girl who loves the color pink. Well, you could say like, oh, that sounds really nice if you're being nice. Or you could think to yourself, that sounds kind of boring. Like, who doesn't love the color pink, right? So not a good, your story doesn't have a hook. That's not a hook. On the other hand, you could say, this is a story about a girl who eats too many pink cupcakes and she turns pink because of it. And she doesn't listen to her mom, she turns pink. So, of course, that's this book. I'm messing up the camera here, but yeah, that is this book, which a lot of you probably know. Great hook. It's just super fun. So you can see how we turn something kind of boring into something exciting. So the next one, which, by the way, if you don't know this book, know it. It's, my boys love it. I can't tell you how many. I probably know this book by heart. So, but this is someone says to you, I have a great story. This story is about a boy who visits the zoo and he sees all the different animals. And I'm going to go through and describe all the animals to you. Well, not too exciting, honestly. Not commercial. Nobody's going to buy it. But you could say, this is a hilarious story about a boy whose class goes on a field trip and gets eaten by an anaconda. Awesome. Who can't love that? That's this book. Class 2 at the zoo. And it is so funny, so hilarious. So the whole class goes on a field trip. They they don't see the anaconda. It's in the background, and he eats one by one. He eats all the kids, and so the whole and the teacher, and they're all inside the anaconda. And then a little girl comes along, and she rescues them. And then at the end, the surprise that's really funny is that a little boy who's not in their class pops out too. It's just funny. Okay, I'm done. I'm done with that one. Okay, so okay, I'm gonna do one more. So someone says to you, I have a great idea for a story. It's a story about a pigeon who decides to go sightseeing. Well, it sounds like maybe it could be interesting, but I think I need a little bit more to pique my interest. So this is what I would say. I'd say this is a story about a pigeon who wants to drive a bus. And will you let him? And of course, one of my favorite books is Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus by Mo Willems. So those books all have hooks. If you study books, if you study picture books, you should ask yourself that, like, what's the hook here? And get really good at doing it, because this is what you need to do with your own work. Okay, number 5. I see this too. This is kind of related to the hook, but it's a little bit different. This is a book that has zero plot, and I mean zero. Your picture book needs to have a plot. It can't be just some lovely poetry, lovely language, some ruminations on nature. Cannot. Nobody will buy it. That kind of stuff has been done already. Again, we want commercial. We want things that are exciting, things that will sell. Your plot needs to have what we call a story arc, which is a clear beginning, middle, and end. And I'm not going to go too deeply into this because it could be a whole talk in and of itself. Again, I'm going to list some resources that can help you with that. You can Google it. You can read books about it. There's a ton really dedicated to this. But your story basically can't go on and on without a plot. Like, things need to happen so that the end of the story, it's all about the end of the story sometimes. It really delivers. It makes the beginning and the middle are leading you to the end, to a really satisfying resolution. And you want your story to move forward in an exciting and satisfying way, so that each sentence is kind of leading you forward. Excuse me. So I'm going to give you 3 different approaches that work for plot. And there's a ton, but these are my favorite. They're really great for picture books. And if you're having an issue with figuring out maybe how to plot your story, you could maybe think of one of these 3 things. The first is what's called the character growth story, where you have a character who starts out in one place or with one problem or something they want to solve or something they want to accomplish. And the picture book story arc allows them to do that. And then at the end, they kind of go through, they're trying some different things. And they don't quite get it right. And then they don't quite get it right. And they try again, and they get it. That's what we want to see them get it, even if it's not the resolution that they expected. And so they're really solving a problem. They're different at the end. They've experienced growth. We always want to see our characters experiencing growth, because otherwise I'm not sure that there's too much of a point. So I'm going to share some books that do this really well, and you can read them on your own time. One of the character growth story is Grumpy Bird. Actually, the Scholastic book is published while I was there, by Jeremy Tankard. And so Grumpy Bird is super, super grumpy, and he doesn't know why, he just is, which is, that happens to all of us. And as he goes through his day, you see him becoming less and less grumpy, and there's reasons why. At the end, he's not grumpy anymore. And so, but he had to make a change of heart in order to do that. And it's just a really lovely, fun story. So the next one is The Fun Romp. Kind of Class 2 at the Zoo is a great example of that. And you have this fun plot twist at the end, which Class 2 at the Zoo does. And this is one story that if you haven't read, you have to read it. It's one of my favorites. Bark George by Jules Pfeiffer. So George, his mom says, "Bark George," and he like meows, and then he does a duck noise, and he just can't bark. And the mother's like, "What's wrong with this with my son?" And so they go to the vet, and the vet reaches in and like pulls out a cat, and then he reaches in and pulls out a duck, and it's you get this, it's just this really fun, hilarious story. And the end is really satisfying too, and gives you a surprise. So the next way to plot your book, and this would be more for like a fun facts, history, nonfiction kind of thing. I think nonfiction is underrated. My boys love nonfiction. Always have, always have. And I think people always think with picture books you have to write fiction. Um, think, challenge yourself, perhaps. If you're writing some fiction, challenge yourself to try nonfiction. It has to be really fun. It has to be different. It has to be a different angle on a topic that maybe has been covered before, but you're looking at it differently. My boys loved this book, which is What If You Had Animal Teeth? And so it goes through the plot of it is that you go, it's not a story so much as imagining if you had teeth of a cobra, like what does that mean? And it gives you fun facts all about that. So, okay. So number 6 is not knowing your audience. And so this is, coming from a commercial publishing background. What are publishers looking for in a commercial picture book? What are they looking for? They're looking for something that is going to sell. So the days of just like the nice poetry book about like nice, cute things. I mean, it's not going to sell. I'm sorry, it's not going to sell. It's lovely, and you should totally try to make something of it. Try to think about a hook if you have something like that. Who buys picture books? Parents buy picture books. Parents buy a lot of picture books. Teachers buy picture books, a lot of them. And I'm sure there's other categories, but I would say those are really the main 2 categories of who buys picture books. They're buying them for their kids. They're buying them for their classrooms. Schools are buying them for their libraries. So what do parents and teachers look for? I'm going to give you a list. The first is entertainment, pure entertainment. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus is a perfect example of just something that's just super, super fun. Something that teaches lessons. Think about kindness, being proud of being different. Books that teach lessons without being didactic, I would say, are definitely something that parents and teachers are interested in, especially kindness nowadays. So parents and teachers they look for authors that they know and love. So you say, well, how can that help me? Look at those books. What are they doing? What are they doing right? What do you like about them? Can you put a spin on something? Could you think about Pinkalicious and do something? Could you emulate it somehow? Could you make it different? Could that inspire you to think about a new idea? New ideas are always super exciting. Okay, so parents and teachers are also looking for nonfiction, any kind of knowledge, history, science, anything like that. I mean, obviously is just huge. So again, don't overlook nonfiction. Concept books, potty training, new brother and sister, new life situations, any kind of life situation really. Any kind of milestone, like a birthday, first day of school. I just wanted to bring this up because it's just such a fun book, but it's Hard to Be 5 by Jamie Lee Curtis. You guys might already know that one. It's old. All of my boys loved it. They just thought, wow, like she really gets me. I'm 5 and it's not always easy. And they really loved that book. So any kind of a milestone is always important. And then my last one on the list is, seasonal celebrations, holidays, the marking of something important. Okay, so now we're on to number 7. These I kind of lump together. I see them a lot, and I would say that they're general pitfalls. They're things you just fall into, and sometimes there's no getting out of it unless you hire an editor like me. I'll plug myself a little bit there. So what I see a lot of, terrible rhyme. Just if you can't rhyme, do not think that children's picture books need to be in rhyme. There are so many gorgeously written picture books. They do not rhyme. They just have they sound beautiful. Someone has really paid attention to how the lines read, to what the words, to each and every single word, how it sounds written, how it sounds when you read it out loud. So, a lot of times I get some really sing-songy kind of stuff like da 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 da, and it really forces you into this rhythm that's not that people think is fun, but it's just really it kind of drags on, and it a lot of times I'll see a lot of really forced writing. You're forced. What I mean by that is that you're trying to make that end rhyme work, and so you come up with like these ridiculous words that make no sense and contextually make no sense at all. So I would say that's better avoided unless you really are great with rhyming. I have a lot of clients who come to me and they're terrific at it. And I say, well, go for it. I think if it sounds great and you're doing a good job with it, let's do it. So another thing I see a lot is language that kids can't understand. I see this a lot. I see it so much. I say, like, um, a kid is just, they're not only not going to understand this word, they're not going to understand the context that you're putting this whole, situation in. And someone says, well, the argument I always get back to me is that, well, they're reading with a parent, aren't they? Well, yeah, they are, but do you think that parent wants to take time out and like stop and explain a situation? Your picture book, your story really needs to speak to the child and not rely on the parent or teacher to explain things. And it's tricky. And, somebody, um, maybe if you don't have children or if your children are, a different type of reader, I mean, that's fine. That's when you really want to rely on your editor or somebody who does know kids and can say like, this is just going to be too tough for kids. The other thing I wanted to say is don't forget humor. All my boys love to read, but I will say like the more serious stuff, they were like, whatever. They were like, whatever. If it was funny, it held their attention. And I will find that with funny, humorous picture books, that it really does hold the attention of the reader. So don't forget your humor. Okay, so topics that are dry and boring. Sometimes I get things and I just think, oh boy, like we need a hook. And that goes back to the hook. It can be a dry and boring topic. And actually, I can't believe I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you a book that my boys really love. It cracks me up every time. Who would have thought? It's the funniest book. They love it. They think it's awesome. It's because somebody decided to do it and do it really well, and it's really funny. It goes through like all these different animals and stuff. It's quite good actually. So if you do have a topic that seems like maybe it might be difficult, think about your hook and how you might make it interesting, because everything is interesting. Okay, so my last point here is doing what there's already a lot of. I understand that people, if pug books, for example, are really, really popular, everybody decides to write one, and then we end up with too many. And by the time you actually get it edited, ready to send out, you're sending it to the publisher, they've already published their pug books and they're not going to consider yours. So you need to think like, well, what else hasn't been done? What else can I do? COVID, another, I mean, yes, we all want to address it. We all want to write it. We're all going through it. But I can tell you right now that if you're writing a COVID book and trying to send it out, it's going to be a very difficult sell, because I'm pretty sure they've already come out with the ones that they want to publish. Number 8, your query letter. And I'm sure that you might have more questions for me about query letters, but I would say this. I would say that your query letter is almost as important as your picture book manuscript. This is where you're selling yourself. And so I see a ton of query letters that are totally boring. It's just like they're slapping on, like, here's my story. This is an opportunity for you to sell yourself. It's almost like a job interview. You're saying like, this is my story. This is what it's about. Here's my hook. Here's something about me that I want you to know. So another thing I see with query letters, besides being really boring, is that you're not personalizing it to the agent or to the editor. That's a big mistake. You don't want to just send off 200 query letters. I mean, you could, but I think that agent or editor who's so busy wants to know, why are you sending me your story? Is it because I have an author that you like? Is it because I published a book about like a strong female girl, and you have one that you think I would like, or maybe you've read on a blog that I love funny books? Are you going to send me a funny book? So what happens is you really want to match up who you're sending your stories to, and it takes a tremendous amount of research. I am not even going to lie about that. It takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. The other thing I see in query letters is too much plot. You don't want to just it's not about plot, it's more about your hook. So you want to highlight your hook. So that's the query letter. I pretty much, those are my 8 points. And again, if you have more questions about query letters, I can answer them, but I can see we're starting to edge up to our Q&A time. So the golden secret, and I hope this doesn't disappoint, but I have some other information. So if the golden secret's terribly disappointing, you can at least say, well, I got some information after that. Is really to study and know picture books. I get a lot of picture books manuscripts from people who have never, I'm talking, they have never gone into a bookstore. They don't browse Amazon. They don't buy them. They don't read them. They don't know picture books. They might remember something they read to their kid 20 years ago. It's enjoyable. It's really fun. And the only way to know how it's being done is to actually read them. And I'm sure, you know, most people are reading them, but if you're somebody who's maybe new, make it a fun project for yourself and just start reading picture books left and right. It's one of the best things you can do for your education for yourself, and see which ones work, see which ones maybe you think don't work, etc., etc., and read them out loud. Picture books are meant to be read out loud, so please read them out loud. And it'll just teach you a lot about the market too. And I would say most importantly is the belief that you can do it. You know, all of these people, all these examples I used today, there's just somebody who at one point in time never had a picture book published. So I know a lot of people worry like, oh, I'm brand new and nobody's going to look at me, but everybody started out as a debut author, and it's actually really exciting. I think that publishers find that terribly exciting to have somebody who's brand new and who is very talented. Here's some things that I think publishers are looking for right now. I'm going to go through them really quickly. One is diverse stories. That's very hot right now. And stories that challenge norms and traditional ideas about the way things are supposed to be. That's pretty big too. Girl empowerment, strong female characters. STEM and science are still pretty big. Unicorns and other magic. Not magic like Harry Potter magic, but stories that have magical elements. They really capture the curiosity of kids. Characters with mega personality. A lot of dog books. Who doesn't love a dog book? Dragons. Dragons are always big. But think cute and sweet and funny and not scary. Laugh out loud humor, and again, nonfiction, especially little known figures or events. And then I would say my last, and then I will be done here. My other advice for you is that if you're actually serious about your writing, is that, you know, Reedsy is a great resource, and there's people like me who that's what I do and that's what I love to do. If you can afford it, it's definitely worth it to hire an editor. I have never worked on a story that has remained the same. It has always gone through incredible transformation, and not just because, you know, I'm an editor, but because of the communication between me and the writer, and seeing kind of what the holes are and what needs work. It's really worth it to have somebody with an outside point of view, with experience in the children's book world, to look at your story for you. And I would also say be open to great change for your story. In fact, if I get a sense from somebody that their story is the way that it is and they don't want to change anything, I won't work with them, because I think it's probably fruitless. Like, I'm not sure that you and I could work together, because I think every story I've ever worked on, even at Scholastic, from seasoned authors, has gone through huge change. And this is a big one. And then I'll just list some resources for you. I would have more than one manuscript before you try to get published. And the reason for this is you might send your story out. You've been working on one story, working on it. You send it out all over the place. And someone gets back to you and says, it's an agent, and they say, I really like your writing. Wouldn't you know that I just have a story exactly like this? What else do you have? And then I have seen people freak out, email me and say, I don't have anything else. What am I supposed to do? Well, if you have 4 or 5 picture books that you feel confident about, you can send that book to that agent, and it just is a lifesaver. So that is my recommendation. Again, all of this stuff takes time, but it's worth it in the end. So resources. This one is a bit hard to say. I cannot recommend this organization enough. It's SCBWI. It's Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. They're global, and in the United States, especially, they are in every state. There's some chapters that are have more than one chapter in each state. I'm a member here in Pittsburgh. I think it's $60 for a year. They host events. I mean, COVID has sort of changed things, but it's a great resource for writers, for new writers especially. It's just a community of people who only are working on children's books. And there's like wonderful conferences where they bring in people from New York. I used to actually speak at SCBWI all the time. I'd go all over the country speaking, and it is so engaging and so wonderful. The other thing I wanted to mention is Publishers Weekly. If you go online, Publishers Weekly has a free newsletter called Children's Bookshelf. Definitely sign up for it. It comes out every Thursday. It's publishing industry news, and so you'll get children's books every week in your inbox, and it's such a great teaching tool. The other thing I wanted to mention is, which I'm sure you guys know already, but Reedsy I'm just so impressed with everything that they have. It's just the resources are incredible. I also like Writer's Digest, and I also like Kidlit. It's Mary Cole. She's an editor like I am, and she has just like this amazing website with all kinds of great information. She has newsletters too. So that's everything. That's what I have for you today.
Okay, amazing, fantastic. Well, that was really great. Like we've now entered our Q&A bit. It's going to take a while for questions to roll in, so I thought it's a good time to say if you enjoyed that, please give us a thumbs up and a like. It'll help spread the word of this on YouTube. While we're waiting for some of the questions to come in, one of the things I've seen quite a lot of in the comments are folks who are like writer illustrators. So if you are sort of insistent on doing your own illustrations, what's the sort of best way to get your foot in the door, I guess?
That you mean like with a publisher?
Yeah, if you wanted to go through the traditional route, if you are,
Yeah, if you
a
want to go
writer.
through the tradition, yeah, I mean, I think if you're an author illustrator and you want to go through the traditional route, I always recommend that you seek an agent. Not many publishing houses, I don't think, are really accepting unsolicited manuscripts. There are some. So your best way to go is to present your work to, query with a really good query letter, an agent, and that is the best way to get your foot in the door. If they like your illustration style and they like your writing, agents are very, very interested in author illustrators. And it's not only it's part of it is because they get a higher commission off of it because you're an author and you're an illustrator. And so if you, I mean, it's actually it's can be quite a nice relationship.
So if an author illustrator goes through an agent, do they
Hmm.
effectively pitch the completed project, or does it tend to be the manuscript along with maybe some light sketches?
Yeah, it could be that. I've seen a bunch of different things. I mean, you have to understand too, the great thing about having an agent is that, when I was an editor at Scholastic, I knew all the agents and they knew me. So they would just come to me and they would say like, "Hey, Jen, I have this author illustrator who's really amazing. This is her art style. What do you think? They'd send me like a couple of stories like, what do you think? So I would definitely want to see finished art. So, I wouldn't necessarily need to see a full picture book dummy, but I would definitely want to see some pieces of finished art. And again, if you have the time to put together your whole dummy to show your ideas, or you can do thumbnail sketches. I would often see thumbnail sketches for works too, with some finished pieces of art.
We have a question here from Karen McMeekin. Any thoughts on wordless picture books?
Oh, they're incredible. I mean, my thoughts on them is that publishers are always interested in doing them. I wish I had one at handy. I have a bunch of them that I just really, really love. So I think the tricky thing with a wordless picture book is communicating what you envision that book to look like. And that is where you would need to have illustration notes. You would want to really, in your manuscript, you would go through and share your ideas for that wordless picture book. Either, you don't see a ton of them. I think that they're far and few between, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible to get one published.
Okay, we've got a question here that I can probably answer. How do we find a children's book agent? Well, first of all, I guess as Jennifer mentioned, you have to, start with a query letter. We've got some resources on Reedsy about writing query letters that we'll send about with the follow-up to this. But Jennifer, I guess, how would you sort of recommend people actually start researching children's book agents?
Yeah, so one way to do it is I had mentioned Publishers Weekly, the children's bookshelf. The nice thing about that is they list deals that happen every week. So any agent that you see in there doing a children's book deal is going to be on the up and up. They're going to be premier children's book agents. It's a great way to say like, oh, look, this agent just sold this picture book to HarperCollins. So I'm going to go and research them. So it's kind of like you're using the newsletter as a way to get and to get some names, but it's a great way to do it. I mean, that newsletter comes out every week, and you will find just a lot of information about agents, and then you just go and you do your own research. I did want to mention this book. Oh, sorry, I always do it the wrong way. Guide to Literary Agents, and it's updated every year. It's not just children's, but I think there's really good information in this book, and anybody who's listed in here again is just going to be a trustworthy agent.
Yeah, over here in the UK, I think the equivalent is writers and artists.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there seems to be good ones there. A question here from Kenyon Newman. Do I find an editor first or an agent first?
So I'm assuming what she might mean by editor is somebody who's at a publishing house publishing children's books. You would want to find an agent first. Again, like I said, I don't think that many editors at publishing houses are accepting unsolicited manuscripts. So you would want to find an agent first. And then what that agent does is they go to the editors. Like, when I was at Scholastic, they'd say, hey, Jennifer Rees, I have this manuscript by this new writer. Can you take a look at it? So definitely you probably want to go trying to find an agent first. It doesn't mean that you can't submit to an editor at a publishing house, but again, a lot of them they don't accept unsolicited manuscripts, which means you can't submit to them.
But of course, before you do start querying agents, it's not a bad idea to reach out to some of the editors we have here on Reedsy. As Jennifer mentioned, to just go through, your manuscript first.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are asking how much does it cost, and it's a bit sort of sensitive, so I won't ask you your specific rate. We have an article on the Reedsy blog where we try to give average rates, per word rates for all sorts of editors, which kind of works for most people apart from picture books, because when there's like 600 words in a book, you can't really apply the same rates to it. But it's not crazy expensive, I don't think. Like, definitely for like
Yeah, I don't think for picture books it's crazy expensive. My rates tend, and again, it depends. For me, it depends upon, it's not really based so much on word count as it is on the complexity. If somebody wants like 3 or 4 revisions, I have different packages where, I work with somebody on a manuscript, and then they send me the revision and I read that and we get to a final. And so obviously that's a lot more expensive. And so my prices for picture books really range anywhere from, I would say, like $250 to maybe 500, depending on what they need or what they want or the complexity of the project.
Cool. We're seeing some questions about how much it costs to get an agent. Would you just quickly run through how the agent deal works?
So how the agent deal works is it does not cost anything to get an agent. If you have an agent that's asking upfront for money, that's not somebody you want to partner with. What happens is you'll have a contract with an agent. You'll be one of their clients, and that will be your representative. And what happens is when they sell your picture book to, say, Scholastic, um, you get what's called an advance. So your agent will say, okay, I get a certain percentage of that advance. And there's other contract terms, but that's how it works. So you don't actually pay your agent upfront for anything. It would be dependent upon the contract you end up getting with the publishing house.
Okay. Does the agent get a cut of the royalties, like forever and ever?
Um, I'm pretty sure that there's some language in there. I'm not an agent, so I don't know exactly how that works, but I'm pretty sure that an agent makes a cut of what you make, and it's fairly reasonable. They do all the work for you,
Hmm.
so in your corner, they take care of your finances. It's a big commitment on the part of the agent, so it's definitely a great relationship for a writer to have. There's a lot that an agent does for you that you just then don't have to worry about. And of course, they're the foot in the door, and that's what you're paying for too.
Cool. Okay, I've got quite a broad question, but any thoughts would be useful publish or trad publishing versus self-publishing for picture books?
What is the question?
I don't know. I guess like is I guess the thing we always get is do you find that self-publishing is a viable route when you're dealing with picture books?
Yeah, I think so I do have here's the deal with self-publishing is that if people self-publish for a variety of reasons. Some just because they want to have a book to read to their kids, totally fine. If you are getting into self-publishing, you have to understand that all the onus is on you. Everything is on you. So if you're not prepared to market your book, if you aren't prepared to do publicity for it, if you aren't prepared to get out there with your book, to get it recognized, to get attention for it, then it's not going to sell. So, if you have somebody, I have a lot of people who are super creative, they have a background in marketing, whatever, and they're just say, I'm going to do this myself. And they do a terrific job and they have great sales because they know what they're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, I always recommend like doing thorough research to find out if it actually is for you because it's not easy.
Yeah, because at Reedsy we deal with a lot of people who go into self-publishing, and like one
Hmm.
of the reasons why you can potentially thrive in self-publishing is because ebooks are so convenient.
Yeah.
The overheads are nothing. Would you say with picture books are ebooks a thing even?
I think, I have to say, I mean, I'm just old fashioned. I do think they're a thing. I do think, I think almost every kid, I mean, I don't know, my kids have iPads. I mean, they do read on their iPads. They do the school, there's some of their assignments, especially this year with COVID and homeschooling. A lot of their books were on, were ebooks. So I do definitely think there's a market for it. Definitely. I'm just more old fashioned. I like to have the actual book.
Yeah.
So you will find a lot of people like that who would rather have the actual book.
Uh, okay. So wait, I've got a question here. Well, Penny, where's the best place to find an illustrator? If you do decide to self-publish and you do need an illustrator, then Reedsy is as good a place as any. We do generally have a lot
Yeah.
of great illustrators and designers who come from the world of traditional publishing, who like Jennifer, because I think like in publishing these days, most people start working freelance. There aren't a tremendous number of people who work purely in-house at publishers, and so the
Mm-hmm.
same people you'll find at Scholastic or Simon and Schuster, whomever, will also hang up their shingle here at Reedsy. So all you need to do is just go on the site, check out their profiles, send them a request. There's literally no obligation for you to hire anyone. So it's fun to sort of do. It's like doing Fantasy Zillow, where you just go see who you can potentially work with on your own book.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've got a question about Christian books. Have you ever worked with any thoughts on Christian titles, or like specifically religious titles? I guess.
Yeah, I have actually. I've had quite a number of them on that I've worked with on Reedsy. A lot of times they're self-published, but I have a couple of people who did find success with. I mean, if it's a very specific, if it's a Christian title, you're really going to have to go search for a publisher who works on those kind of books. Like major publishers usually kind of shy away from that.
Yeah, another thing to say about self-publishing as well is that you kind of have to know where to sell it. So,
Yeah.
if it's on a specific topic, if your book is about Yosemite National Park, if you're able to have an in with the gift shop at Yosemite, then that's a natural place where you're going to want to sell it. If it's a Christian book, then having an in with a local church, or knowing that you can sell it at your church, or at your local Christian bookshop, that's really helpful as well. Like you don't have to sell a lot of books in order to reach your audience. So it
Yeah,
really depends.
absolutely.
Okay, let's see if I can find a couple more. Well, okay, this is everyone's doing our marketing for us. Blake Levinson, what type of children's picture books do you like working on?
I I mean, I honestly, I really like a range. Um, I do really love humorous picture books. But I also love nonfiction. I work on so many nonfiction picture books at Reedsy. I really, really love them. Because everybody thinks nonfiction is dry, but it shouldn't be. It should read exactly like fiction. It should be just as fascinating as fiction. So I would say humorous picture books. Um, I love picture books that have like really strong, interesting characters. Someone that you would want to read about. If Can you hear me?
Sorry, I'm muting
I can.
myself. Uh,
Oh, okay. Oh
it's
my God, yeah, I can't
it,
hear you,
it's
but
it's like every meeting I'm in at work, I just mute myself at some point and natter on for
it's
minutes.
okay.
Anyway, Tammy asks, what category do ladybirds fall under, and how many words? Uh, are you familiar with ladybird books?
No.
I think they could be a very UK thing. They're sort of like board books.
Oh.
That all
Oh,
tend to be
they're
about.
board books?
I think they tend to be board books, maybe, or like they're quite thin, slim volumes. I remember having them as a kid, um,
Oh.
but I feel like they're sort of narrative light. I want to say, but they tend to
Mm-hmm.
be like walking around Kew Gardens. So I'm afraid, Tammy, we're probably not in the best position to answer this.
I
Um,
wish I could. I wish I could. You'd be surprised what you find when you Google, though.
yeah, and
Things like that will come up.
Ladybird Books are a very specific publisher as well. There's a good chance, like if Ladybird Books are still publishing, you could probably go onto their site and see if they have any submission
Mm-hmm.
requirements. You
Mm-hmm.
probably can't do Ladybird Books without Ladybird Publishing. So, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, anyway, oh yeah, sorry, moderator sound is gone. God, this is embarrassing. I can't cut this out of the webinar either. Anyway, Jennifer, thank you so much for doing this. This has been amazing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
For all of you at home, we're going to do a transcript in a couple of days. If you've signed off on Eventbrite, we're going to put that one out and send that to you. We're about to host another Reedsy Live in 2 weeks where we're going to dive into science fiction a bit and see what sort of sells in that particular market. But again, if you need anything, Jennifer's Reedsy profile is in the description of this video. Have a look, send her a request. She's fantastic. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a great day. If you haven't already, give us a like. I'll see you next time. Bye.